Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 23-24 series of Artist Talks. Today, I am joined by Rufus Jupiter, one of our first artists in this gallery season. Their exhibit, Polymorph, that explores themes of queer embodiment and synergies between fauna, flora, and the human existence, is currently on display in our front gallery through November 4th, 2023. So welcome, Rufus, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So why don't we start out with you just having you introduce yourself, where you're from, any past exhibits or your experience in the art world.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born in Wisconsin, in Madison, and I lived here for all my childhood. Apologies if there's street noise behind me too.
Mhm.
Um, and currently I live in Viroqua, Wisconsin, which is a rural location. Um, in my uh, in my college years, I went to school out in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, at Carnegie Mellon, and I was an art student. Um, and during that time, I had a focus on 2D forms, so like painting, drawing, printmaking, with an emphasis on the drawing and the printmaking. So over the years, I've done various media. As a child, I always loved to draw, always, all the time. And then, like I said, in college, I got more into I moved from printmaking more or drawing more to printmaking, and that continued post college. Um, and then I kind of took a break and focused on other things in my life. I got a teaching degree, and I ended up working as a school teacher in various settings. And when I returned to art in the past few years, I've done a lot of painting experiments. So polymorph kind of comes from that. Um, and I think the other thing that I would mention about my background is that since my days in Pittsburgh, community outreach has been very important to me in terms of artwork. And so, like, what are the ways in which we can engage each other and our neighbors and our neighborhood, like in creative pursuits, and how can we make art accessible? So that's a big one for me as well.
Wonderful. And specifically with Polymorph, what are some of your main inspirations or hopes with this exhibition and this body of work?
Sure. Well, so I think embodiment is a theme. So as an artist, and I'm sure that I'll talk about this too in terms of the specific works, but I started out in college having a very strong, uh, very strongly drawn to do self-portraiture, I guess, as an exploration of my art, and so that's continued. And over the course of my life, I've had several different um, forms that I've taken, I guess, as a queer trans person. So inherent in that process. I don't know. Fortunately, unfortunately, I'm not sure exactly. It's kind of a messy thing for me, but inherent in that process in our culture is sort of like this to come out to people or to not come out to people, stay closeted or what have you. And it, like, that push pull within you sort of thing that dictates which form you present, and also your internal feelings of which form you are. And so like I've navigated that throughout my life as to who am I in this moment. And um, uh, in recent years, I've also been doing a lot of performance art as one of my art forms. And so that idea of like somatic embodiment and becoming uh, a relatable thing with your body. So like being among trees and becoming a tree, like what does that feel like in your body? And likewise, integrating your own processes. So like the embodiment of being queer, like how do I feel my queerness in my body? Um, all that and like relating to like animal life, plant life, has kind of like all flowed together in the making of these pieces.
Yeah, that's really beautifully put. Let's get into some of the specific pieces. So this is
Great.
our first piece. What are some specifics or process that you go through in creating this?
Great. Yeah, so this one I believe is my newest work in that whole exhibit. And that one's called Animus. So this one started out as an oil painting. And I kind of, this one involved a lot of playing. Sometimes when I'm doing one of these pieces, I will have a really clear vision and I will have the finished product somewhat in my mind, and I will just be chipping away at that process over time. And so, like, some of these oil paintings were like that, where I knew what I wanted to create, and I was just layering and layering and layering with the paint. Um, this piece was a surprise. I had no idea what it would be. Um, and so I kind of started with this possum head form and kind of worked from the top down. And eventually it wanted to become different things and then something even different still at the bottom. Um, I really enjoy the freedom of playing with media in that way and just seeing like what happens when you allow yourself to just like uh, break down that wall of like, how am I supposed to proceed with this image. um, and the gold leaf is something that I played with in another piece that was in this exhibit too, and I've been wanting to use it for a long time. I haven't actually. It was too hard of a decision. Like, I didn't know where to use it, and this one just in the moment I was like, okay, that one gets the gold leaf.
Yeah, and the texture that it brings to the piece is really enjoyable as well. It really, I feel like, brings together those different mediums within the same painting. How do you choose what animals you represent in your piece? Does it come back to that embodiment, or are there certain animals that you feel specifically drawn to?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I think there is some concept behind it sometimes, and other times it is just a feeling, like a resonance. In general, uh, you may notice in my exhibit that it tends to be like individuals with a snout. I really like the long nose, mouth, snout thing. For some reason, that configuration is really powerful for me to use. I think, there's something in there about like voice and loudness and like projection. As somebody who was like closeted in a number of ways for most of my life, and now I find myself using my voice to a pretty satisfying degree, and so I think there's a lot of that coming out in these snouted creatures. This one has their mouth closed. The source images that I use for some of these creatures, not all of them, but something that I'm starting to use more and more is images of animals who unfortunately passed because they were intercepted by a vehicle, so roadkill. And so it's interesting to me to like explore these, like, here's this cute animal, but actually it's a dead animal, and I found it, and maybe it's gorier than what I drew, and so there's this kind of like uh, life and death too that we're looking at.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like I see quite a few juxtapositions um, in your pieces, and I feel like what you just said represents that. All
Yeah, and
right.
I think all of these too, like, I don't need them to convey like what I think about them, and I love that. I love working with this sort of like amorphous creature that other people often tell me like what my art is, and I kind of enjoy that it doesn't, like, they're not going to learn about me from it necessarily. They're going to learn about themselves.
Hmm. Definitely. Well, as we move into this next piece, are there any specific notes you want to make about this or your process, etc.? Here we can see what you were discussing before about animals with that snout and kind of representing you being able to speak and show yourself.
Um, yeah, I think, this one is strictly an oil painting. And that was a medium that I didn't really explore when I was in art school. Um, like just a little bit, but not really. So I kind of came around to that, a couple decades later and started playing around. And this one especially speaks to me as a self portrait. Um, so yeah, in terms of like that, exploring the evolution of self, exploring the evolution of identity, and at this point in my life, uh, I'm very much like in my body. I'm very much like exploring like my transness and my queerness, and it feels really good.
Wonderful. Great. All right. Let's move on. These are two pieces, Gay Fowl 1 and Gay Fowl 2. These are your two watercolor pieces in this show. Would you mind talking about your process and inspiration behind these?
Yeah, definitely. Um, so these two little birds, I wish I had looked up what they were called. I always forget. These images come from a book that's been very important to me throughout the years, and kind of like conceptualizing this idea of like uh, queerness and like natural ways of being, and uh, kind of providing a window into all of the multitudes of species that researchers have found exhibit traits of queerness. And that book is called Biological Exuberance. The author is Bruce Bagamile. And it's a really big book. It's like 1,000 pages or something. But in it, it's just a reference guide. So he's presenting to the reader like, okay, like this is what we've been told about queerness, and why we shouldn't be, uh, and then actually here's the reality. If you just look around you, here's examples documented of like all these creatures who are exhibiting like homosexual preference, or like changing gender or whatever. And so it's a great book, and so I used a couple of those images for these little ones.
Wonderful. Thanks for the story behind that, showing that this is natural and this is part of the world, and we are just also humans and expressing those things within ourselves. All right. And so this is our last slide. This is another piece in Rufus's show. Thank you for joining me. And are there any specifics you would like people to keep in mind when viewing your work in person and understanding themselves through your works?
um yeah, I mean, I think just kind of what I said earlier. Sorry, my dog. I Yeah, it's up to your interpretation. I don't know if I need to convey my particular message. I enjoy adding the stories of others as like layers on top. So yeah, it's definitely I'm very glad that I got the chance to share it. And yeah, just thank you so much.
Of course, wonderful. Well, Rufus's show is viewable at the Pump House through November 4th, so feel free to stop by and view their works in person. Thank you so much, Rufus.
Thank you.